future welders, we're back here at AmeriArc Welding Academy with another video tutorial. Today we're going to do a TIG root on 6-inch pipe with 7018 filling cap. We're going to do a back feeding technique. Let's get this prepared, tacked up, and get ready to go. Now that we have this piece all prepped up, we have a knife edge. If you're doing a TIG root, you want a clean knife edge, no landing on the pipe. You prep both pieces, keep it as clean as possible. Like I've said in a lot of previous videos, your prep is everything. We're gonna use a 532 gap. So we're using a 532 TIG wire to create the gap, all right? I typically look for the widest part on this joint. First, I'll line it up, and I'm gonna look for whichever is gonna give me the widest part to put my first tack. We're gonna use penetrating tacks. So we're not gonna use bridge tacks. Penetrating tacks are actually part of your root pass. My technique that I always do at least 3 penetrating tacks. I never put the 4th tack because I typically start at 6 o'clock and wrap all the way around, so there's one less tie-in for me to do. Let's get started. So typically when I put my first tack in, I always hold that filler rod to the top side of the pipe. That's if I'm putting a tack in on a horizontal. So like I said, we're using penetrating tacks, and I always, if I'm tacking a joint on the horizontal, I always hold the filler rod up to the top bevel edge so I can wash down. Remember, we're fighting gravity. So gravity is gonna make that puddle drop. So once it drops, it basically will fuse right into the bottom bevel. Always remember gravity when tacking these joints. Okay, now that we have this piece all tacked up and ready to go, we have you could come check this out, we have a nice 532 to 316 gap, all right? We have nice penetrating tacks. We're going to start from the bottom, finish up top. I like a nice wide gap because the technique that we use is a back feeding technique. So a back feeding technique is when you actually stick the rod through the pipe and you feed from the back side of the pipe. So you're basically welding that root from the inside, okay? That's the technique we use here at AmeriArc. We're using our AmeriArc welding torch, as we use our AmeriArc tungsten. All right, we're using 1/8, 2% lanthanated tungsten, and we're using 1/8 filler rod. We have a nice 532 gap, nice wide loose 532 gap, probably close to 316, and we're gonna put this root in here and fill it up. Let's go. Typically I start from the bottom. I kind of freehand the bottom a little bit. I kind of use both techniques. I freehand and I walk the cup. I like the freehand 6 o'clock because I just really don't want to put the strain on my back, to be honest with you. I could walk the cup at 6 o'clock. The big thing I try to do is just try to focus on keeping that rod connected. Keeping that rod, feeding that puddle. Don't let it break off. I'm feeding from the back side of the pipe. Keeping that heat concentrated on the welding rod. I'm not walking up those bevels too much. right around here, I flip it and I go to walk in the cup. It's funny because my style of welding, I kind of do both. I kind of do a little freehand, a little walk in the cup. Again, I think it's just a matter of fact of, I don't want to be all at the bottom, putting all the strain on my back. So now I'm gonna walk the cup and walk this root right on in here. Again, I usually just put three tacks in so that I have one less tie-in. Again, I'm actually keeping that filler rod on the back side of the joint. I'm running out of filler rod, so I'm going to break this off. I'm feeling like we have nice penetration. I'm going to stop right now so that I can actually ramp my tacks, so that when I go to tie into this 12 o'clock tack, I could just have a smooth transition all the way into that tack. All right, so like I said, I'm about to come up to 12 o'clock on my right side. I'm gonna take a second just to use the grinder to ramp my tacks, ramp the front and back of my tack, so that once I tie in, I have a nice smooth transition. There's no chance of a pinhole or lack of fusion on the inside. So if you take a look at this, I took a second, I ramped my tacks, and if you look right here, I actually really ramped it. I really thin out that tack so that as I come up, I can transition nicely into that penetrating tack. Because we're using penetrating tacks are actually a part of your root. So you want a nice, I don't really use bridge tacks. Bridge tacks is great. There's nothing wrong with bridge tacks. I just don't use bridge tacks. For me, it's just I'd rather do penetrating tacks, and I have no problem tying into my penetrating tacks. And I'll show you how it turns out. Let's go. Right now, I have my heat on around 95 amps, and I kind of like the root somewhere here around 95 amps. Goes pretty good. 95 to 100. I really I feed that puddle. I just feed that puddle into that root. I'm focusing my heat on the filler rod. I'm not focusing my heat on the bevels. So I don't walk up the bevel. All I'm really looking to do is just melt that filler rod. So now that I'm at the top, I pretty much try to keep, I don't keep the filler rod on the back side of the puddle as much, because gravity is going to help pull it down. I keep it raised a little above, because like I said, we have gravity. Gravity is going to do the work for us. Once we run into this tack, now I kind of take my time. I remove the filler rod and I just massage the tack, so I can make sure it's fusing nicely on the inside. I walk up the side of the bevel and pop off. And we can always check it out for a little extra reassurance. So now I'm gonna jump to this other side. So far that root is coming out pretty good. You could check it out for yourself. So now I'm gonna switch to my other side, and we're gonna pick up the root from the other side. Again, my technique, I kind of like to freehand the bottom Really, so I'm just not like underneath there, putting all that strain on my back. Now I kind of flip it. Once I get in my comfort zone and I finish freehanding, now I flip it and I walk the cup and just swing all the way around. Personally, I think walking the cup is a little faster for me. Every welder is different. So some welders are freehanders, some welders walk the cup. I'm running a little low on rod, so I'm gonna stop for a second. Contractor likes for you to weld it down to the nub. So here's a little safety tip. I personally always bend the tips of my rod. One time I was on the job and I'm kind of a new welder, TIG welding, and I'm moving fast, and next thing you know, I had the end of the rod like this. I reach over to get something, I move my hand real fast, and the rod actually nicked my safety glasses. I always keep safety glasses on. Nicked my safety glasses and cut me across the face. So ever since then, quick safety tip, I always bend the tip of my rod. Worst come to worst, if I was to jab myself in any way, I'm jabbing myself with a nice round end. I can't hurt myself. Just a quick safety break. Definitely think about it in the future. So now I switch rods. I have a new rod here. I'm gonna pick up where I left off at. So really quick, if you look over here, I always start about a 1/2 inch back. So the reason why I start a 1/2 inch back is so that I can actually warm up where I left off at. By the time I actually transition into the new filler rod, it's that puddle is nice and wet, and it just liquefies all together, and then you have a nice continuous bead. I never really take the grinder and ramp my stop. I ramp my tacks, but I don't ramp my stop. And if you keep that in mind, start a 1/2 inch back, so by the time you actually get on that tie-in point of the new filler rod and where you left off at, it's a nice wet puddle. It all melts together. I rest my filler rod right on the previous tack. Again, I'm coming up, boom. I make that tie-in. So again, I keep that filler rod on the back side of my puddle, back side of the bevel edge. Again, I'm like using a nice sharp tungsten. We're coming up to our tack. Once we come up to our tack, I actually slow down once I come up to the tack. So once I come up to the tack, then I remove the filler rod, and then I massage the actual tack. Again, I keep that sharp tungsten focused on the filler rod. Again, once I reach the top side of the pipe, I kind of lift that filler rod out the joint a little bit, because gravity is going to take control, and I don't want the top 12 o'clock to be too heavy. So now I'm just closing this up. Earlier I ramped that 12 o'clock tack really good, so we're gonna tie right into there. Sometime when I go to tie in, I use a little dipping technique where I move the filler rod, put it back, move it, put it back, just to really make sure that this thing liquefies and ties in nicely. I dip a little more filler rod in there and then pull off on the side of the bevel. All right? We could take a chance and check that root out, see how it came out. 6 o'clock really came out good. I like the way this root came out. Came out really, really nice. You have a nice, they call this a wetting band. You have a nice wetting band wrapped around the inside of this pipe, this root pass. As you can see, I pretty much have the same level of penetration all the way around the pipe. Typically, according to code, you can't have more than a 1/8. So I say I have like around 16th, close to an 1/8 of nice penetration. Any contractor will definitely say you did a good job if you put in a root pass like this. So now that we're done with the root, we're gonna move on to the hot pass. I just jacked the heat up to around 140 amps. I'm gonna do my hot pass at 140 amps. The root pass was done at 95 amps. This is the easy part. We're gonna do a hot pass and then we're gonna go to 7018, 332 welding rod. Let's go. So the purpose of a hot pass is to give you a little more cushion on your root, especially once you go into like stick welding. 7018 welding rod can be a pretty aggressive arc. So you don't want to take the chance of possibly blowing through. So with TIG welding, I like to put a nice hot pass on. Most facilities will allow you to do a hot pass. And again, it just puts a little more cushion on your root, less chances of actually blowing through once you have to switch over to stick rod. So putting a hot pass on is almost pretty much like welding stick rod 7018. It's like you want to sweep across the middle and pause on your sides to make sure that you really washed into those side walls. With that heat being at 140 amps, you see, I can kind of flow a little more fluidly. I'm using a number 10 cup. I'm using 1/8 tungsten, 2% red rod, made by AmeriArc.com. All right, you can check that hot pass out. As you can see, that hot pass is coming out pretty smooth. I like it. I'll just be able to do one fill pass with my 7018. Looks pretty smooth to me. I like it a lot. I'm gonna jump to the other side and finish this out. All right, we're done with our hot pass. Now we're gonna switch everything over to 7018 stick welding rod. We're gonna fill it out and cap this baby. All right, so now that we have this filled out, we have the hot pass in here. 70S6 is the filler rod that we use for the hot pass and for the root pass. Now we're gonna switch over to stick. This is basically what they call a combo weld. So we're gonna switch over to Excalibur 7018, 332 rod, because we're welding 6-inch pipe. We're gonna put our fill pass in and then we'll cap this and be done with it. My amperage right now for this 7018 rod is around 87 amps, all right? So as I'm running this 7018, I kind of always whip across the middle. I hold my edges. You stay out of that middle. You stay in that middle, you'll blow through this pipe. Middle will take care of itself. So remember, you do got a hot pass on there. But there's always a chance of you blowing through the middle of this pipe. So even though you have a hot pass, don't take no chances of hanging out in the middle. So like I said, you kind of always want to keep whipping across the middle, holding your corners. I like to do a nice little J pattern, at least on the fill. Because again, I don't want to blow through. I'm welding kind of hot. All right, we welded down to there. As I fill up, I try to be a little low because I don't want to overfill too much. What happens when you overfill, you burn your edges away, and your edges, the pipe edges, is used as like a track, a guide for your cap. So quick rule of thumb, 7018 creates a lot of porosity in the startup. So I always want to grind my starts. So at the bottom, I'm going to hit it just to grind my start, just in case if we have any porosity. Typically, if you do have porosity, it's going to be in your start, in your initial strike up in your start. Even though we still strike up ahead and drag back, we don't know if there's porosity right there in the start. So we try to always hit our starting point. So even though we hit our starting point, we're not just grinding it because it's protocol. After I grind it, I actually check it out just to see if I have any porosity there, and if I don't, then that's great. Then we just continue on. If you do see porosity, then you wanna grind that out. All right, now that we're done with our fill pass, I like the way the fill pass came out. Came out pretty smooth. I don't see anywhere where I have any slag inclusion or see any possibilities of porosity. So now we can move on to our cap and we'll be done. For my cap, I don't do anything fancy. I kind of just go left to right, in a zigzag formation, left to right, keeping that rod 90 degrees. Keep a 90-degree angle. I try not to point ahead of myself too much. And again, back to what my original statement was earlier, you do not want to burn off those bevel edges, because those bevel edges are used as like a guide, pretty much like a track to follow. Keeping that arc real tight, 'cause that's how tight my arc is. So when I'm putting this cap on, I'm just really just painting. It's kind of like painting with a paintbrush. I just try to keep my strokes consistent, left to right, and I'm just painting this cap on. There you have it, people. We are done with this from root to cap. Today we did a Tig root 70S6 for our Tig root and hot. We used a nice 532, heavy 532 gap. We use 7018 stick to fill and cap. This is our finished product. Not too shabby. You definitely come see us at AmeriArc Welding Academy, or you can follow us on Instagram at train_awa.com. See you on the next one.